It's Tim Albright with AVNation with an AVNation special celebrating International Women's Day the entire month of March because there's an awful lot of really great women in the AV industry. And with me today is Kanika Khanna from USC. Welcome, ma'am.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
So first of all, my apologies and my sympathies because you work with our buddy Joe Way. And I am contractually obligated to say that Joe's Joe is better than Joe Way. Is also part of our thing. Are you familiar with Joe's Joe?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay,
I've contributed pictures. I may not be on Twitter, but I've definitely contributed to it.
Awesome. Excellent. That's all I need to know. But let's talk for a second, in all seriousness, and we do love our buddy Joe. Talk for a second about kind of your journey, because the thing about technology management and users and folks working in inside the higher education space, their journeys tend to be a little bit different than manufacturers or integrators. So how did you get into the industry?
So in terms of thinking about how things have contributed from when I started way back in middle school, even, it's just the idea of longevity, experience, and kind of being able to cement that into how I perform, so to speak, in whatever realm it is that I'm working in. Yeah. So a lot of it'll come down to now being able to know that it actually applies a lot to what I'm doing with Joe here at USC, is even though I'm not working in a live entertainment field right now, a lot of what I've learned since I was a child has kind of progressed what I do in this realm. And what I mean by that is simply that it lets me keep things moving. That's ultimately what it comes down to. So if I'm working on a class conference call right now, which has obviously been the crux of our work with the pandemic, if something goes wrong, class still has to happen because these kids are paying a ton of money, and I was one of them, a ton of money for their education, and we need to make sure that they're still able to receive it. It's the same kind of mentality that goes into a live show, which is you have a whole bunch of people there, it's got to go on.
Yep.
And it helps not just in the kind of management, making sure things happen aspect, but it also applies in terms of signal flow. If I'm ever troubleshooting something, my audio skill set from day one is what I lean on, is how can I tell what's broken where and how can I fix it, is, okay, well, knowing where does it start and where does it have to end up?
Yeah, right there. Let's kind of turn the corner a little bit and talk about some of your experiences as a woman in the industry. And you have a unique experience, and there's been a couple of women that we've talked to that have kind of that early on experience and kind of followed that all the way through, right? I'm thinking of my friend Cassie, who her dad has worked as an independent rep, so she grew up in the industry, right? So she's has kind of the same longevity as you do, and some of those same kind of historical experiences. So let's talk about, some of the hurdles that you've kind of faced as a woman in a male-dominated industry, and how you've been able to overcome those.
I would actually say still overcoming, to be honest, because it's not,
and that's fair.
It's not gone at all. Gosh, where to start? It's a little bit harder, I would say, in the live industry side of things, just because there's a lot more of the male ego to deal with in that setting, and there's a lot more time crunch, whereas in the professional environment, whereas in education, where I'm with Joe and all the other coworkers that I have, it's a little bit more discussion based. You have the time to be able to say, no, I think we should do it this way, or can you consider that? Whereas if you're in a live environment, the time aspect may not be to your benefit. And having said that, even then, there's still moments where I just kind of have to quirk my head, or I just stop dead in my tracks, because I think one of my favorite examples of this right now is, I don't know if you went to ISE last year, but I will never forget just stopping dead in my tracks when I saw the robot stripper at that booth, and was just thinking, I know we have a diversity council, Vixa, and I know we're like really trying here, but who thought that was a good idea? Like, I don't
And
know.
the problem with that specific instance, and not to kind of, go on the rails a little bit, the second you started saying about ISE last year, I knew exactly where you were going, and that's a problem. It's a problem, and then it's not, right. So the not part of the problem is it was obvious enough that kind of a lot of folks recognized that was an issue, right? And also isolated enough, thankfully nowadays, that was one of a handful of issues that it could have been. As you're talking about, there were a couple of things that probably could have been pointed out, and that was certainly one of them.
Right. But having said that, that is an extreme of something that we kind of see pretty often, which would be the equivalent of booth babes, right? That's the lesser extreme where if I've gone to, and I'm not going to name any names right now, but if I've gone to a booth and I'm trying to find out more technical details about what's going on, and the first thing I encounter is a girl dressed, I don't want to say provocatively, but is a female trying to represent herself objectively to get your attention for the product in the booth, like, that's not what I'm here for. Also, why are you still doing this? And if that's how you're going to market your product, I'm sorry, but I'm gonna go look somewhere else instead. But yes, we all know what happened at ISE, and that was a huge example, but to me it's just the extreme of something we still see every day, and until that goes away, it's...
Talk for a second about the technical part of this, because there's another thread that in having these conversations with women in the industry, and that is the statement is, either not being taken seriously or not being taken seriously when it comes to technical.
Yes.
And how do we overcome that, right? How do we overcome where someone assumes that, Kanika, you're not here to talk to me about technical. You want to know about the market. You want to know what I'm totally going to, I am going to be incredibly, just, I can't think of the word, but just overly simplification here. You care about, Kanika, how pretty it is, right? You care about the marketing material. You don't care about the ohms. You don't care about, the SPL that this thing can point out. You're not concerned with. There's no way in the world you could care about the technical aspects of it. On the other flip side of that is, if you were working for the manufacturer, there's no way that you could know that, right? Which is where some women are experiencing it as well. Mm-hmm. How do we fix both sides of that?
That is a great question, because for me personally, I was thinking about this actually going into this interview, is like, how have I dealt with this? And the main way I've dealt with it has honestly been making sure people know me and know what I'm capable of. And that having said that, it doesn't solve the problem, because it just solves it for me. It just makes sure that people know that I'm technically capable of being able to talk to you about which microphones should I specify for this particular location and why. Like, what are my restrictions? What are my mounting restrictions? What are my technical restrictions? Do I have a power limitation of any kind? And this can apply for any numerous amount of technical aspects of things I need to specify. But the point being, how do I get you to see me for that, as opposed to the marketing side or the management side, which is something I've honestly struggled with, because my resume, if you were to look at it, has every single audio detail that I've ever accomplished and done. But somehow I still end up being pigeonholed into sort of management roles and wondering, I signed up to be an audio engineer. What am I doing? Like, how did I get here? And I guess I don't really have a good answer for how to do it, except for it's the same sort of principle that we see in the media today, just encouraging STEM and making sure that you overcome your own internal bias to ensure that you're not contributing to that conversation and you're not putting someone down just because of it. Like, I can't tell you how many times where I stand next to a male coworker and we're talking about how best to proceed with something. And it isn't until I start really speaking technically that I'm even looked at in a certain way, or in a technical conversation, if I'm sitting next to a male colleague who is also like in an analogous role to me, they're still going to look at him directly until they clearly realize that actually, no, I'm the one who has more of an idea about what's going on here. So about one specific thing. If you're talking to me about video, I will gladly point to whoever the heck is standing next to me, because that is not my forte. But if I'm in a room with a bunch of folks and the question is where to put a mic, and you're looking at my coworker instead, I'm going to raise a questioning eye on you and make sure I talk so that I know what I'm talking about. Yeah. It's a relationship thing, I guess.
It is a relationship thing, but it's also, some of it is something you also said, and that's encouraging STEM, and it's something that I go back to as somebody who runs a media company, and that's also representation, and that's showing
Yes,
women
absolutely.
who, and this is a very simplification of this, but showing people who look like you and act like you and talk like you in a technical role, right?
Right.
So showing young women, quite frankly, yes, this is a career possibility, and here's a young woman who knows way more than I do about audio, and way more than a lot of people I know about audio. So when next time you walk into a room and there's a woman there, don't assume that she's X, Y, or Z, right?
Exactly.
Wait until the introductions are made, or you start talking.
Yeah, and I can't even begin to explain how excited I am when that actually happens to me. Like if I go to a manufacturer and they say, "Hey, here's Katie, our rep on such and such," and I'm like, "Hi, Katie, you're my hero already. Like,
Yeah.
let's do this." It's just so rare for that to happen, and so I'm very thankful to my colleagues out there who do really encourage diversity, and it's been a huge step in the right direction. What I guess I would say is that there is ultimately no one single solution, because we're overcoming years and years of bias that have I don't even know where to start with describing that, but because of it, there is no single answer. It's just little steps that you can take in the right direction. And on the end of myself, of the person who is trying to show that I am capable of this, it really takes a lot of overcoming the imposter syndrome. There are so many times where I've felt like I don't know what I'm doing just because there's someone next to me who looks more the part. And that's always been a struggle. But a lot of it does come from representation. Just with our new vice president in the office, like I'll never forget sitting there and thinking, wow, I have a vice president that's half me. She's half Indian.
Yeah.
How amazing is that? And on a global stage, she has to be taken seriously as the second in command for the leader of the free world.
Yeah.
And while, again, that's another extreme, we still want to see that in other situations in the AV industry. Like I loved when I ran into Corey Schaefer at ISC and was able to talk to her the whole time, and was thinking, where have you been and why have I not run into you before? And the same thing happens anytime I run into another really smart, talented woman in our industry. I want to see more of that. And an idea I have, and this is partially because of what I want to do with my career eventually, is the education aspect. One of the reasons I got into and was really interested into pro audio was because a lot of companies, Meyer, L Acoustic, D&B, they all have their own education programs. QSC, obviously, very well known for that. And I'm going to go ahead and say that's like 90% male-dominated teachers out there. But it would be really cool to start seeing more women out there as well. I know Shure has, I'm blanking on her name right now, but Shure has someone up in the Bay who does a bunch of the webinars for them. And that would be a great way to start getting more women out there, is to see them in those roles that are very public facing for the company and for getting people into the industry in the first place.
I'm writing this down because I'm sending this to every manufacturer that I know, because that's a really, really great idea. It really is. And off the top of my head, I can think of one fantastic female instructor I've seen in the last 20 years in AV. And that's Melissa Dillman. And she used to work for Kramer. Now she works for Starin Marketing. It's a distributor.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. It's a really publicly facing, but also it's a way, again, representation and showing that women do know what they're talking about.
Exactly. And it's something I personally want to do to help encourage other women. Even when I'm doing training on a smaller scale, just like within my own teams and such, it gives me a little bit of, it helps me overcome my imposter syndrome. No, I actually do know what I'm talking about because I can help explain it to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
all right, Kanika, as we kind of wrap this up, you mentioned you know what you want to do with your career, so we're going to talk about that for a second. Look back, imagine yourself retirement, your first day of retirement, even, right? And look back. Either what impact do you want to have, or what do you want to see have changed in the industry?
I want to see more women in technical positions, and not just technical positions like engineering, but technical management as well.
Okay, I like that. That'll work. How do we do that?
That's a big one for me.
How do we get there?
We get there by encouraging those who are already kind of paving the way and putting more people up there. It starts with something as simple as considering someone with a name you don't recognize on a resume for a position. It starts with, and by recognize, I don't just mean like you don't know the person. I mean, you can't say that name. It starts with, oh, Joan is applying for something just because her name is Joan. Give her a shot. Let's see what happens. Just getting someone to start talking to them is a huge step in encouraging them to moving in the right direction.
I like that. Kanika Khanna from USC. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
How do people connect with you? Absolutely. How do people connect with you?
I'm on LinkedIn for the most part. I don't really use much of Twitter, but if you reach out to Joe's Joe, they'll tell you how to find me on LinkedIn.
That makes me smile. All right. Thank you so much. Just connect with her on LinkedIn. For us, for AVNation, go by our website, avnation.tv. That's avnation.tv. You'll find this program and a host of other interviews with women in the AV industry, all that and more at avnation.tv. That's avnation.tv.